Salutations, every pup, and welcome to Chapter 8 of Ignore the Dementor by NinjaPandaScholar. As always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's get on into the fic. Chapter 8 Don't Poke the Dementor. Harry stayed with Hedwig the entire night after her attack. He followed her throughout the Forbidden Forest as she hunted and flew around. Nothing in the forest would dare to challenge a Dementor, so he knew if any of the larger, nastier creatures decided to try out Owl for dinner, he would be there to protect her. Unfortunately, he did have to keep his aura firmly pulled in, or he would scare off the mice Hedwig was stalking. He was sick and tired of being cold all the time, but it was worth it to watch over his best friend. After picking up Jamie in the morning, Harry realized the soulless body wasn't in the state of good health he had been tirelessly trying to get it to for months. Jamie felt heavier than normal and almost feverish. Normally, Harry wouldn't feed from his classmates at breakfast because he didn't want them starting off the day with a lower mood, but he had to that morning. Already he knew it was going to be a rough day. Ron and Hermione glanced at him worriedly across the breakfast table while he pulled his scarf closer around his neck and blew on his hands. It might be early October, but it felt like January in the dungeons to Harry. Harry's sour mood turned slightly better when the owls flew in with the post. "Oh, I completely forgot!" Harry smiled at his two friends and pulled the letter Hedwig had brought him the night before out of his robe pocket. It had passed the sniff test that morning to be worn again. Quickly, he pulled it out of the envelope with a small red stain on it that Harry couldn't bear to look at for a second longer. "What's that, Harry?" Hermione asked, putting another scoop of eggs onto Harry's plate with concern in her eyes. "A letter from Snuffles." The Dementor smiled wistfully after reading it. He passed it to his friends, who read the cramped scribbles of Harry's godfather. "Harry, I hear you have a Hogsmeade weekend coming up. If you haven't checked out Mooney's old hangout yet, you really should. It's a good place to go to enjoy a butterbeer or a couple chocolate frogs. Let me know how you're doing. Snuffles." "Is he saying what I think he is?" Hermione frowned. "That's way too dangerous." Harry shook his head in exasperation. They just didn't understand. He only did because he had felt the emotions rolling off his godfather in dark, depressive waves. "Hermione, that house is slowly killing him. If he doesn't get out, it'll do what Azkaban couldn't. I'll make sure he's safe," Harry assured her in a whisper. Sometimes the safest option isn't the healthiest. Hermione frowned but couldn't seem to come up with another argument. Ron shrugged and handed her the letter back. "Just don't forget the meeting for DADA," he reminded. "The twins have spread the word to most of Gryffindor already." Harry sighed, still not thinking it the best idea he was the one chosen to lead it. "Sure, I'll do that first and then head to see Snuffles." "Fine," Hermione said thinly, looking a lot like McGonagall in a disapproving way. "We need to head to Care of Magical Creatures now, anyway." The Dementor groaned as Ron came to the other side of the table and dramatically pulled him to his feet and pushed him towards the door. "Please, please, no unicorns," he asked the universe, while Ron continued to lead him out of the entrance, chuckling the whole way. "Mr. Potter," a silky voice stopped Harry as he was walking through the entrance hall of the castle, giving him a strong sense of déjà vu. "This seems to be becoming a pattern. What, may I ask, happened this time?" Snape frowned and crossed his arms sternly from a dark alcove Harry had just passed. Did the man hang out there during his free periods to catch students sneaking around? Harry wondered. Harry sighed as he dabbed at the shallow cuts on his face with the handkerchief he had borrowed from Neville. "I don't want to talk about it." He shrugged awkwardly and avoided eye contact with the vampire. "It seems you are as abysmal at care of magical creatures as Mr. Longbottom is at potions," Snape remarked with a question in there somewhere. Harry recognized what he was asking. He wanted to know if his accidents in care of magical creatures had something to do with whatever creature he was. "Yes, I think I'm just as bad as Neville." Harry rolled his eyes as he continued to try to stop the bleeding. "I still have some essence of Murtlap. May I go back to my dorm now, sir? Harry asked, with a sneer at the end. Not until you tell me what happened. The potion professor glared at him warningly, promising point deductions if he didn't cut the attitude. Harry shuffled his feet in embarrassment. This time it was his fault. Well, it was the Dementor's fault, really. But he was the Dementor, so he gave a long, suffering sigh. I got into a fight with the Niffler, sir, he finally groaned out, looking at the floor. Harry glanced up in surprise at the emotion rolling off Snape. He expected to see the man rolling in laughter, but his face betrayed no emotion whatsoever. It's not funny! Harry glared at the man, answering the emotion instead of the expression. It tried to take my locket. It's mine! The Dementor sneered darkly at the end, touching the locket hanging from his neck protectively. The humor continued to roll off Snape with a little confusion as well. Probably because the teen had detected the emotion when he was so good at hiding them. Much as I feel it's important to protect priceless artifacts, I'm certain Professor Grubbly Plank could have retrieved the necklace for you without a fight ensuing, Snape remarked darkly, but Harry recognized the repressed laughter. May I ask after the health of the Niffler? The teen sneered at the thought of that evil furry gremlin. Sadly, he's still alive, Harry remarked dangerously. He'll think twice about taking other people's shiny things, though. Snape raised a surprised eyebrow. You must watch yourself, or people will begin to ask questions, he warned. Harry Potter is a noble Gryffindor. He would never attack a small, defenseless creature. Harry motioned to the scratches still bleeding on his face. Defenseless my ass! He exclaimed unrepentantly. Language! 5 points from Gryffindor. Snape sighed in exasperation. My point still stands, and you need to see Madame Pomfrey. Nifflers aren't known to be very hygienic. Harry shook his head frantically. No! He hissed out lowly, so only someone with vampire hearing could hear him. She'll find out! Snape rolled his eyes and physically turned the team towards the hospital wing. How do you think we find the members for remedial potions? The vampire remarked. Madame Pomfrey is an alumna. She may find out, but if you mention your remedial potions, she'll keep your secret as she does everyone in the society. Really? Harry sighed in relief. He inevitably ended up in the hospital wing every year. He figured his luck would run out eventually, and he would have to see her before the end of the year at some point. I have permission to tell all society members that she is a high elf, like Neville is, Snape assured him sternly. And Potter, for the sake of secrecy and my sanity, drop care of magical creatures after owls. Yes, sir, happily! Harry beamed at him before rushing up the stairs before the professor could stop him again. Even with Snape's assurances, Harry dodged into a secret passage up another set of stairs and through another passage that put him out at Gryffindor Tower. He wasn't going to chance Madame Pomfrey just yet. Finding out there was a fairy or a vampire in the school was one thing, but a Dementor was a whole other story. He wasn't ready to have that conversation with anyone besides Luna, who he had firmly decided was more understanding and compassionate than anyone else on the planet. Instead, Harry cleaned the cuts thoroughly in the dorm washroom as he had learned to do from a very young age since his relatives could not have cared less when he injured himself. Or, more likely, Dudley injured him. He then applied Hermione's essence of Murtlap and was relieved to see the scratches completely disappear. Knowing he wasn't welcome back in Care of Magical Creatures, Harry grabbed his books on dark creatures and headed down to the dungeons. Gryffindor Tower had too bright of an aura, and the few students who were in there on a free period were too happy for his injured Dementor's sensibilities. To keep himself from drawing attention, he found a nice alcove deep in the dungeons where he could release some of his Dementor aura without anyone noticing that it was colder and more depressing in that small section of already cold dungeon. Feeling warmer and happier than he had all day, Harry smiled as he cracked open the book where he was reading up on how to trap a Dementor in the one chapter they were actually mentioned. In all his reading, Harry's conclusion was that no one really knew or understood Dementors outside of maybe the Department of Mysteries, and they weren't telling anyone what they knew. It didn't help that no one understood the Dementor language. Apparently, no one bothered to ask house elves if they did. So, in all his research from the Black Library and Hogwarts Library, all Harry had found out was that whatever had happened to him seemed completely unprecedented and probably went against everything anyone knew about Dementors. Dementors ate souls, and they multiplied in mist. They did not suck out a soul and leave it and turn it into a Dementor. Whatever had happened to him, only the Dementors themselves seemed to know. As for how to trap a Dementor, there was a bit of speculation on that point. From the little information Harry could find, it seemed that Dementors could only be trapped willingly. Harry frowned at anyone willingly being trapped. It seemed that Dementors could enter into magically binding contracts that they had to fulfill, but it must be willingly. If the Dementors were all guarding Azkaban, then they would have to have a contract with the Ministry of Magic, which means the Ministry had to have some way of communicating with the Dementors at some point, and there had to be a reason for them to agree. Harry was confused why he wasn't currently trapped at Azkaban then. If all Dementors were included in the contract, his magic should have pulled him to the prison, right? All this caused him more confusion when clearing anything up. All this caused him more confusion than clearing anything up. He had to be the strangest Dementor on the planet. If I weren't already a freak, Harry thought wryly. What are you doing here, Potter? A familiar voice asked in a tone somewhere between derision and concern. Hey, Montague? Harry caught himself, remembering things were drastically different outside of remedial potions, and it wasn't his friend here. It was too bright in the dorm. Montague frowned and took a step farther into the alcove. Harry realized quickly that he hadn't retracted his aura, but the Slytherin didn't seem affected at all, strangely. The seventh year cast the same silencing ward Luna did when she had first told him of the secret society. Harry, Graham crossed his arms and looked at the younger teen. Have you told anyone what you are? Luna, maybe? Or Neville? You have to let someone in, or all this secrecy will drive you batty. Harry frowned darkly at the Slytherin. You know, I don't believe anything written in the Daily Prophet. You're saner than you have any right to be. Oh, sorry. You know I don't believe anything written in the Daily Prophet. You're saner than you have any right to be, Montague assured him quickly with a sigh. Look, my father is a Death Eater. Harry's eyes widened. He already assumed this, but Montague just coming out and saying it was a whole different matter. Why are you telling me this? Montague slid down the wall to sit on the floor beside the Dementor. My creature genes come from several generations ago. It completely skipped over my father and even his father. He doesn't understand what we go through or why the society is so important to me. Not that I've told him about the HSMC, mind you, Graham explained as he leaned back against the stone. He comes to every Quidditch match and reads all progress reports sent to him, not because he cares, because he wants to make sure I'm following the path he wants me to be on. So I'm not just hiding what I am from the school, but also my family. I have a feeling you're in a similar situation from what little you've said. My father might be a Death Eater, but I'm not. I don't believe for a minute the Dark Lord will care a nut for magical creatures beyond what he can use them for. I've heard all the propaganda spouted, and nowhere in pureblood supremacy is there a place for magical creatures. So I might act like a Death Eater in training, but I'm really hoping you win, and not because you represent the light, who also has never done anything for us, but because you're one of us now. You understand when others just can't. The two sat in silence for a minute as Harry processed. Luna, he said with a smile to the older man. Luna knows what I am. Dobby the house elf does too. Good, Graham nodded, and Ficht punched Harry's shoulder. Now stop being creepy and hiding in alcoves. There's a perfectly good window seat that looks out into the lake not 5 meters down the corridor. Harry laughed and started gathering up his books. Ah, books on dark creatures. Any guesses as to what I am yet? Montague asked, in interest, as he picked up the book Harry had been reading and passed it to him. Harry shook his head and shrugged. You're strong, powerful, and have an aura that screams steadfastness and immovability. If that makes any sense. Wow, yeah, it does. You can see auras? The Slytherin looked at him in awe and surprise. Harry shrugged again and smiled. Bigfoot? He asked, not able to hold in a chuckle. Montague grimaced and pulled Harry to his feet, ending with another fake shove. Merlin's beard, where did that come from? Hell no. Valkyrie? Harry raised an eyebrow, chuckling again. They're only women. Montague threw his arms up in exasperation. Salazar, I'm a gargoyle, you dolt! Harry stopped laughing and stared. Like the statues on the roof of the castle? He asked in surprise. He hadn't heard he hadn't read anything on gargoyles. Graham cancelled his silencing ward and smirked at Harry. They're carved to look like us. Look me up sometime and read up on Valkyries as well, for Merlin's sake. We do have a couple in the club, and they'd kill you if they ever learned you thought I was one of them. Really? Harry smiled as he ran through the club members in his head, trying to guess. Thanks for the advice. Montague gave him a dismissive wave behind him as he continued on in the direction of the Slytherin common room. Feeling much better, Harry made his way down the hallway, looking for that window seat. Harry left the Hogshead pub in a hurry after the interest meeting for their new secret DADA club. He couldn't believe how many people had turned out. There weren't any Slytherins, but since it was mainly Ron and the Weasleys, twins spreading the word, that made complete sense. Neville, Luna, Eyre, David, Brooke, Colin, Dennis, Aurora, and Aurelius all attended the meeting from the Remedial Potions group. Harry was certain that Eyre would have liked to bring Kara from Slytherin since they were really close, even outside of the club, but being the only Slytherin would be daunting for the fourth year. Harry hurried along until he was sure no one could see him where he was hiding by the Shrieking Shack. Quickly, he threw his invisibility cloak over himself and snuck into the rundown structure. As expected, a large, shaggy black dog was pacing in what passed as a sitting room in the small building, though it didn't have any furniture, and that hadn't been destroyed by a werewolf years before. Padfoot didn't seem to realize he was in the room, surprisingly, so Harry checked that his aura was pulled in as completely into himself as magically possible before throwing off the cloak. Siri! He yelled. The black dog jumped into the air in surprise before falling over in throaty canine laughs. A tall, gaunt man suddenly appeared, laughing in its place. Oh, Merlin, I'm losing my touch, Sirius barked out in laughter. After a couple more laughs, he stood and suddenly hugged Harry. I've missed you, pup. I've missed you too, Sirius. Harry awkwardly patted his back, praying his aura was unnoticeable as tightly as it was pulled into him. How's living with the aura going? He finally asked when the animagus pulled away, a huge grin on his face. Sirius wrinkled his nose in disgust. At least the house always has people in it, but no menace, lot of them. How are you? Any exciting happenings this year so far? Harry pulled the sleeve over his mangled hand subconsciously and shook his head. I'm not doing so well in Cav magical creatures, but there isn't anything major going on. I made a new friend. Her name is Luna, and she's awesome. You would love her. The former prisoner gave Harry a very wolfish smile. Oh, really? So you like her? Harry blushed and looked away. Maybe, I don't know. I just know I like spending time around her, okay? Yeah, pup. That's definitely okay. Sirius laughed and plopped onto the floor, pulling Harry down with him. Oh, yeah, these are for you, Harry remembered, and pulled out from an enlarged pocket in his robes a couple bottles of butterbeer and a handful of chocolate frogs. As requested. Brilliant! Sirius was opening a chocolate frog wrapper before they had all hit the floor in his excitement. I can't convince anyone besides Mooney to get me these, and he's been out on some sort of mission for the Order recently. Harry looked at his godfather and got a thought. There was someone who could help him with the problem that had just come up. Hey, Padfoot, do you happen to know of a room in the castle large enough for about a dozen or more students to practice magic that can be warded or is secret enough that a certain High Inquisitor couldn't find it? Sirius choked on the chocolate frog. Merlin, I'd heard about the Ministry's rat at Hogwarts from Snivelus, but they made her a High Inquisitor? What's wrong with everyone? Harry threw his hands up in exasperated agreement. Well, she is, and she isn't teaching DADA at all. We're starting a secret club to learn it ourselves for owls, newts, and obviously to try not to get killed by Voldemort. We don't have a place to do it, though. You know of anything? Unfortunately, they didn't have a faculty sponsor like remedial potions, so the room had to be one that no one knew about. And in all Harry's wanderings that night, he couldn't think of a single one that didn't have prefects or professors patrolling around it. No, sorry, pup, Sirius said as he sadly opened a bottle of butterbeer and passed the other one to Harry. You should ask the house elves. They know everything. Do you know where the kitchens are? Wait, what am I asking? Of course you know where the kitchens are. I do, at that. Harry smiled happily. And I need just the house elf to help. Hey, do you think you could sneak me in as Snuffles to watch the club sometime? Sirius asked, with a manic gleam in his eyes. Harry thought about it. Sirius was a former Auror, so he would be good to get some tips from, and no one outside of Harry's direct friend group, except for Dumbledore and Snape, knew about his animagus form, and they wouldn't turn him in. Well, hopefully Snape wouldn't. If Umbridge caught him, he was a dog, so she should just kick him out of the castle. If she did something more drastic, Harry could protect him. He slowly nodded. Yeah, I think I could, but maybe after the winter holidays. I'd like us to get settled first and make sure our room is safe. Sirius looked happier than Harry had ever seen him, causing his Dementor side to react some, but the teen pushed it down forcefully. Brilliant! You're coming to Grimmauld for Christmas, right? I can think up some good spells for you guys to learn. This is epic! Yeah, that would be great, Sirius. Harry smiled at him kindly. I'm looking forward to Christmas with you at the house. You know, I think it's lovely, unlike some other people I know. Sirius shot him a glare, but brushed it off. Hey, speaking of, what did you do to my elf? What? Creature? I never even talked to him, Harry responded in surprise. What happened? Sirius shrugged and unwrapped yet another chocolate frog. He cleans the room you stayed in at least once a week, unlike anywhere else in the house. I even saw him put dead flowers in a vase by your bed a few days ago, and if anyone mentions your name, he gets really quiet and looks like he's just seen a boggart or something. Harry's eyes almost got a bit misty at the elf putting dead flowers by his bed. The best flowers, if his inner Dementor was to be believed. I really don't know, Sirius, Harry said honestly. He figured the elf knew what he was, but his actions were strange regardless. I'll try to corner him and ask him about it over break, yeah? Sirius grinned and gave Harry the rest of his half-eaten frog. Harry frowned at it, but saw how happy Sirius was to share. With an internal grimace, he ate the other half. I think my mail is being screened. Do you know any other way we can talk? Yes, Harry asked, swallowing the tasteless chocolate. Sirius thought for a minute before smiling widely. There were mirrors James and I used to talk to each other when we were in separate detentions. I need to find them, but yeah, they must be in the house somewhere. That would be great. I could see you then, too. Harry smiled at the broken man fondly. That would be great. Send it with a post owl and ward the package so that only I can open it when you find them, okay? All right, pup. Now, tell me all about this Luna girl. Dobby! Harry called out in a screech at around 1 a.m. after the Hogsmeade weekend. With a pop, the house elf was jumping up and down in front of the Dementor that was hovering in the library. Harry Potter, sir! How may Dobby help you? Do you happen to know of a room that over a dozen people could meet in and practice spells without getting caught by Umbridge? Harry asked, in as quiet a screeches as possible. Dobby thought for a minute. Just evil Toad Woman or everyone? He asked in contemplation. Harry chuckled at Dobby's description. Actually, yeah, everyone who isn't invited would be good. We don't have a sponsor like the other club I'm in. Dobby smiled. Professor Potion Master, good sponsor. He asks Elvises for the best snacks for the students. Something tells me he wouldn't be excited to sponsor this club, though. Any ideas? Harry smiled. He had noticed the snacks were quite good for those who actually like food, that is. Or blood. Or crickets. Or caviar, surprisingly. I knows the room! Dobby excitedly grabbed Harry's skeletal hand and pulled the hovering Dementor behind him. Dobby knows the come and go room! All Elvises use the room occasionally! They ended up by a portrait of a man trying to teach trolls ballet. Harry Potter walks 3 times and thinks of what he wants. Dobby motioned for Harry to pace by the portrait. Okay, Dobby. Harry would have an eyebrow raised and a speculative look on his face if he had eyebrows. Or a face. He did what he was told, though, and gasped as a door appeared in the wall. Dobby clapped his hands and rushed to open the door. Yes, this works! He nodded happily. Merlin, Morgana, and Mordred, Harry breathed out in surprise. It was perfect. Harry Potter just needs to think that no one finds it, and when he asks for the room. Dobby continued explaining as he checked out the dueling platform, dummies to practice on, pillows for soft landings, and mirrors to see what was going on. Thank you, Dobby. Harry smiled and pulled out his lip balm, a habit that was starting to cross over even to when he was in Jamie. This really is perfect. Now I just need a lesson plan. Harry Potter will be the bestest teacher, the elf assured him as they made to leave the room. Harry stopped at the door and cocked his hooded head. There was something in the room, something like the locket that was calling to him. It was so faint. He eventually brushed it off and followed his friend out of the room. You guys need any help in the kitchen, Dobby? Harry asked, wanting something to do. It was a little boring wandering around alone every night. I'm a pretty good cook, and not above washing dishes. Yes, Harry Potter, help! Dobby grabbed his hand once more. He talks to Dobby and Winky while they work. But that's not... Harry sighed and gave up as he was pulled through the air behind the now running house elf like some kind of Dementor balloon. It was kind of funny. Jamie was definitely getting sick. The first meeting of Dumbledore's army was a huge success as they learned the disarming charm. Hedwig was doing great. Dobby and Winky were kidnapping Harry at night to hang out in the kitchens at least once a week. Remedial Potions was relaxing after long days of people thinking he was an insane liar, and Umbridge was more and more evil by the day. Also, Jamie's hand was without a doubt infected. This time, as Harry began writing lines with the blood quill, he fumed with the certainty that this detention was completely unwarranted. Not that any of them were, but Umbridge just didn't like the way he looked this time, and that was the excuse for the detention. He felt feverish, and his inflamed hand had hurt even before he started writing. Now it was on fire. He felt like he was betraying Jamie. Yes, Jamie was him, but also not. It was hard to think of the soulless body as an extension of him when it just felt so not him. He felt like he were hurting Hedwig when he hurt Jamie, and that made him warm with anger. Actually, it made him hot. Actually, he was hot. After being freezing cold for so long, Harry was confused why he was suddenly stifling in the room. Oh no. He finally thought in dread as he realized he didn't have any hold on his aura at all anymore. Afraid at what he was going to find, Harry put down the quill and slowly looked up from his parchment. He sighed and kicked himself as he took in the sight of Professor Umbridge cowering in a ball behind her desk, with tears streaming from her eyes. Shit, he mumbled. Okay, so he didn't feel bad for her at all, but as soon as she recovered, she was going to know something was wrong with him. Hopefully, she recovered. Harry also felt wonderfully full at the moment, so she probably wasn't doing too well. He had to get help in covering this up, Harry thought, as quickly as he could. Professor McGonagall had a history of not believing him, so he didn't even want to try her. He quickly discounted the headmaster as well. He was certain he'd be expelled for attacking a teacher, even if it was unintentional and very deserved. Madame Pomfrey still didn't know what he was, or that he was even a magical creature. Snape was his only hope. He really, really hated that thought. The Dementor took off at a run towards the dungeon and Snape's office, praying he was in there. Luckily, Harry caught a glimpse of long black hair as he skidded to a stop in the potion professor's doorway. "I need help," he gasped out, trying to catch his breath and clear the lightheadedness that was coming from his sickness. Snape looked up and, to his credit, stood and grabbed his cloak to help, seeing that something must be really wrong. "What did you do?" "Okay, well, he was still a git." "Umbridge, I didn't mean to," Harry gasped out and motioned back the way he came. In two strides, Snape was at the door and grasping Harry's bleeding hand. "Blood," he commented simply, as he held up the hand to get a better look. "Yes, I'm bleeding, and it's probably infected, so please restrain yourself from eating me and help." Harry motioned with his other hand in frustration, not concerned at all about the vampire. He was certain in a fight between a Dementor and a vampire, the Dementor would win every time. Snape sneered at him. "I was only remarking that I smelled blood, and you were injured. I take it you fed from Umbridge after she injured you. That looks like the work of a blood quill," he remarked, with a strong wave of righteous anger sweeping over Harry that he was surprised to feel directed not at him, but Umbridge. Harry was stunned. How did Snape figure out what he was? How did you... Never mind. You need to help her." He pulled his injured hand out of Snape's grasp. Snape grabbed a few potion vials from a shelf and swept out of the door behind a jogging Harry. Harry frowned, upset that he had to jog to keep up when Snape was only walking quickly. Jamie really was short. They reached the DADA classroom where Umbridge was still curled up on the floor crying. Harry actually ran into Snape, who had suddenly stopped and was studying the woman with a mask of indifference on his face. Harry distinctly felt confusion and worry coming from him, though. "Sorry," Harry mumbled, but the man didn't even seem to notice. Snape quickly waved his wand, casting a non-verbal spell. "She's not anemic," he remarked, and put his vials he had picked up from his office in one of his pockets of his robes. "Why is she not anemic?" He turned and asked Harry with a raise of one eyebrow. Why would she be? I think if you just obliviate her and maybe gave her some chocolate, she'll be fine. I've never tried a memory tron before and didn't want to chance turning her into Lockhart, as much as she may deserve it." "Why would she be anemic?" Harry asked, in confusion, while he explained why he had gone to Snape for help. The vampire studied him like a specimen he was deciding to use in a potion or not. "You are not a vampire?" Harry's eyes widened, and he coughed in surprise. "You thought I was a vampire?" He was beyond relieved the man was so far off base with his guess. "Apparently, you are not." Snape frowned sternly at the Dementor in front of him. "Okay, Potter, now is the time I ask, and you answer. What exactly are you?" And that's a wrap on Chapter 8. Ooh, what a cliffhanger! But we get to see Umbridge defeated on by a Dementor. I wonder what's gonna happen next. This was such a fun fic. I loved it so much. I hope you guys loved it. Please leave the original author, NinjaPandaScholar, some love. Please leave me a comment because I really love reading comments. They make me really, really happy. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye, pups!